a keynote last year? Last time I was there, because I missed it because I was working at school most recently. I said that gaming is the foundation of and the mortar which holds together my group of friends from high school. And to this day, you know, like, we've had divorces and we've had marriages and we've had children, and you know, people have come and gone, but the core of us have always stayed together. And if I send an email to our little, you know, listserv and say, hey, I'm going to barbecue this weekend, so if you want to come over, everyone will have something that they have to do. If I say, hey, I'm going to have a game day, you know, come over, we'll play games, pretty much everyone will come. Even though we end up doing the same thing, goofing off, playing games, drinking beer, and enjoying each other's company. And it's such a great excuse to bring people together. And I think that this is something that we tend to forget as gamers. Certainly doesn't happen here at PAX. I mean, PAX is probably the most inclusive gaming community I've ever been lucky to be part of. But, you know, you see them from time to time. Those guys that just sort of want to feel superior to someone because they can calculate to hit armor class 0 and you can't. You know, I think those guys are kind of missing the point. It's not about that, man. We got together to play Cal and D. Again, it was supposed to be a one-shot. Now it's like, I think we're into the 4th session of the one-shot. And the last time we played, Martin's little gnome had a gnomish hook hammer, which most of you don't know why that's so funny, but it really is. Trust me. And we were fighting, I think we were fighting like a hag or something like that. And the hag ran by Martin's gnome, and he tried to trip her with his hook hammer. And, you know, he's that big, and she's like full size. And whatever he rolled, he was like right on the cusp, and Cal says, well, listen, if you can come up with some kind of like really awesome pun that's related to, you know, Travelocity, then you make it. And Martin goes, and like, my writer brain is like going, no, that's not good, that's not good. Here's that one, that's funny, go with that. And I'm like, I've got a writer's room in my brain, you know, and we're all pitching to each other, like, what's it gonna be, what's it gonna be? And Martin's just frozen, and Kyle goes, really? And Martin goes, and Martin goes, 5, Kyle goes, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And Martin goes, I got nothing. And I go, really? You're the Travelocity gnome. How about something simple like enjoy your trip? The writer's room didn't even put that one on the wall. And Cal says, you have displeased your God. You have fouled your name. You no longer look and act like a Travelocity gnome. You are now a gnome-sized William Shatner working for Priceline. You must talk like William Shatner. It's as awesome as it sounds. All right, this is called Have You Played Atari? About 12 years ago, my wife and I pulled her original Atari 2600 out of storage, and we hooked it up to our television. We set it on the floor next to my Sega Genesis, and we showed it to our kids. What's that? One of them asked. This is how we started playing video games at home when we were kids. Yeah, your uncle and I got this for Christmas in 1977, Anna said. Nolan, who was 5 at the time, he just turned 20, said, you guys are old. You know how kids associate height with age when they're in elementary school? We were getting ready to go to my great aunt's 84th birthday party. And my mom says, we're going to go to Aunt Alice's birthday party. And Nolan, who was I think 6 at the time, said, oh, how old is she? And my mom says, she's 84. And Nolan goes, she must be tall! Yeah, we're totally old, I said, not knowing that 10 years later, he and I would have to stop playing Frisbee in front of our house because I hurt my hole when I tripped over the curb. We looked at the 2600 together. One shiny silver switches jutted from the top of a black, sleek body that was wrapped in faux wood grain. Black rubber cords snaked around it, ending in the iconic joystick controllers that are woven tightly into the fabric of my hand. A cardboard box, its edges revealing the passage of time as clearly as its contents, sat on the floor beside it. Inside, 20 game cartridges waited, each a key to a time machine. Combat, Pitfall, Yar's Revenge, Space Invaders, Centipede, Missile Command, Cosmic Arc. I pulled Combat out of the box and gently pressed it into the appropriate slot, just like I had probably thousands of times between 1979 and 1985. I felt a surge of excitement well up inside me as I turned on the television and slid a tiny black switch from TV to game. Just turning on the PS3 or the Xbox or the Wii. It's not the same as taking that switch and looking at that switch and going, I'm turning you from a television into a game. I should have predicted the response I got from both of my kids. They grew up in a world where Genesis was state-of-the-art, and my original Game Boy was lame because it wasn't in color and weighed too much. That's it? He looked at the screen and cycled through colors that even in the 70s weren't exactly attractive. It flashed what I hoped was an enigmatic smile at him as I dramatically prepared to blow his 7-year-old mind. I held the joystick in one hand, enjoying the familiarity as it settled into my palm, and I grabbed the game reset switch and gently pulled it down. The familiar sound of tank engines rumbled into life, and I was shot through time to the shag-carpeted, wood-paneled living room of the house I grew up in, playing against my younger brother on our black and white television set. I prepared myself for a trip through the wormhole to Nostalgia Town, but before I could get swept away, I was jarred back into the present by the equally familiar sound of a tank firing its cannon and blasting its opponent. I looked up at the screen and saw my tank spinning against the wall. I glanced to one side and saw that Nolan had picked up one of the controllers and was grinning. Okay, so you push up to, he shot me again. While my tank spun around, he began to giggle. All right, okay, now just give me a chance to show. He shot me a third time. Okay, I said, it's on. For the next half hour or so, we blasted each other in all the permutations of tank combat, from an empty field with straight shots to my personal favorite, invisible tank bomb with maximum walls. We tried airplane combat, but my kids grew tired of that variation as quickly as I did when I was slightly older than they were. When we finished playing combat, we moved to some of the other games in the box. Without any assistance from me, both my kids figured out Missile Command, Space Invaders, Air-Sea Battle, Pitfall. In fact, the only game that gave them real trouble was Raiders of the Lost Ark, a game that I don't think I ever beat when I was a kid, one of the few Atari 2600 titles which I recall needing the manual to fully understand. Thankfully for us all, the nearest copy of E.T. was a landfill in Arizona, where it belongs. After I wrote this, a guy that reads my blog sent me an email about how, because I said when I quoted this on my blog, I said, so I'm thinking that I might fire up PT on an emulator to see if it's really as appalling as I remember it. And this guy emailed me and he said, you know, I have an emulator and I thought this would be fun, so I loaded it up to see, and it's quite possibly the worst game ever designed. It's just awful, and I gave it to my daughter, who was the age that kids were when this game came out. Show her, maybe see if we'll make it an adult like Rain or whatever. And he said that she got so angry at the game, she was like 7 or something, that she just gave up on playing. For the next several weeks, my wife and I noticed that the very small video game time budget we gave the kids when they were little was invested almost exclusively into Atari games, while that state-of-the-art Sega Genesis sat unused in the cabinet beneath our television set. Why do you think the kids like playing Atari so much? I asked her one night after they'd gone. I mean, besides it being awesome. I think the simplicity of the whole thing makes the games more accessible. Remember when we were kids, how we used our imagination to add details to the games? Remember how easy it was to just start playing and figure it out in a couple of minutes? I think they're doing the same thing. I agree with her. The 2600, with its simple 8-direction joystick and 8-bit graphics, was easy for our kids who were 5 and 7 to pick up and start playing immediately. After a while, it couldn't compete with the console systems their friends had, and they eventually lost interest. We kept the 2600 in the house. long enough for me to rack up high scores on Pitfall that I never would have been able to achieve when I was 10. I totally would have been in Pitfall Heritage Adventures Club. And for Anne to eliminate any doubts about her ability to utterly destroy anyone who was foolish enough to challenge her in the ARC battle. We eventually put the 2600 back into the garage, where it still lives, on a shelf next to an Atari 800 and a TI-99 4A, the very first computer I ever programmed on. I kept them because understanding our past is fundamental to understanding who am I kidding. I kept them because I loved them.